Poverty Point, Louisiana. This is a nomadic hunter-gatherer society with the most basic of stone tools. They have stone axes, stone arrowheads, stone shovels, really nothing else. Life 24/7 is about survival. There's no skilled artisans or trades. There's no time for that. You hunt, you gather, you move on. You're lucky if you're going to make it into your 40s. No dreams of becoming an engineer or a poet or a politician. You hunt, you gather, you fight 24/7 to survive, and there is nothing else to do with your time. But then suddenly, inexplicably, overnight, you and your people put in 10 million man-hours of moving dirt in baskets to create this place, Poverty Point.
Poverty Point is an ancient and enigmatic mound complex located in northeast Louisiana that was inhabited from around 1700 BC to 1100 BC. Poverty Point stands as a complete refutation to typical assumptions and even some typical scholarly opinion of what ancient humans were up to in our country's recent past. Namely, that they were a non-agricultural and hunter-gatherer society who were not nomadic, who were instead sedentary and built cities. These were a people who did not possess or use the technology to grow crops or raise animals, pretty much the two main reasons for any civilization settling in an area permanently, but regardless, built this massive city that served as a central trade hub for the North American continent, as well as serving as a factory complex for producing and cataloging trade goods. There is no other place like Poverty Point in the world. Its design is wholly unique and has never been mimicked anywhere. Its true purpose and use can only be guessed at, and its peoples are nothing short of a complete mystery. The site is preserved thanks to plantation owners who bought the land and who just did not have the means to tear down such immense earthworks, such as many other plantation owners did. I find it incredibly sad and distressing that the historical society maintaining the site today romantically refers to the slave-owning couple who tilled the land as some kind of champions of preservation or history, when the preservation was only possible because dump trucks hadn't been invented yet. They were just another group of white settlers who stole the land from the native peoples and used it for their own gain, and were buried in one of the mounds, in one final act of desecration of this very special place. There is no other site in the Americas or the world that resembles Poverty Point, whereas complexes and earthworks of, say, the Mississippians or the Hopewell and Adena, Fort Ancient, Plaquemine, and more used similar layouts or design principles in the construction of their cities and ceremonial centers, which in a broader sense span the continent or their society's sphere of influence. Poverty Point were a one-and-done society, designing and constructing this one unique site with its unique design, and that is it. No more. The complex comprises 5 mounds, the largest of which, the Bird Mound, ranks among some of the largest man-made structures in the world, and the whole of the complex is partially surrounded by 6 concentric semi-elliptical ridges. There are many theories as to what role these ridges served, but given that archaeologists have found them to be full of artifacts and ovens, they most likely had houses lining the tops of them. But no actual remains of homes have ever been found along with these ovens, so it really is anyone's guess.
If you remember me flipping out last episode about the Newark earthworks and the size, well, Poverty Point just blows that out of the water. This area is humongous. And I know that it just looks flat to you, but that's the point. These prehistoric peoples reshaped this land. Before they built anything on it, they flattened the whole area. And then they started building the ridges and mounds. This is just gigantic. It's thought that each one of these ridges were living areas because they find hearths, pottery, and tools all around this area. So just imagine rows upon rows of houses, and each section even had its own purpose. This area I'm standing in now, they found tons of knives and blades. This seemed to be like the industrial section of the town where knives were manufactured for skinning hunting and all that jazz. Interesting little spot, this circle you see around me. Radiometrics determined that wherever every little white cylinder you see is where a post stood in a perfect circle. Don't know what significance it had.
Poverty Point is home to one of the oldest known timber circles in the Americas. This one predates all other constructions at the site, having been created during its earliest habitation around the year 2400 BC. Timber circles like this one were probably used to observe calendar dates as well as solar and lunar phenomenon, but there is no certainty as to what use this timber circle at Poverty Point had.
And we're kind of at the interior of the first of the concentric rings. And interestingly enough, this one survives because it wasn't plowed over so much, because this was a slave burial ground. So the plantation owners buried their slaves in one of the ridges, and thanks to that, they stopped plowing that area, and now we have a little bit of that ridge remaining. Thank you, slaves.
The majority of artifacts found at Poverty Point are comprised of bird pendants carved from stone, which may have represented a deity or spirit, human figurines that were often depicted as pregnant, which may signify them as fertility symbols, and most commonly, small spherical carved objects called Poverty Point objects, or PPOs. Though it was common to use small spheroid clay objects to retain warmth and keep heat strong in earthen ovens at the time, these carved and decorated versions found at Poverty Point were not unearthed in cooking pits. So that means most of them were not used for cooking. They are abundant and found in great number at the site, and their purpose is completely unknown. But for that, they were extremely popular, varied in their design, and obviously had a role to play in daily life. Maybe they held them in their hands and stared at them all day long, like we do with our smartphones.
Okay, and right behind me you have the main mound, the large mound, the bird mound as they call it. And then, talk about geometrical alignments. Behind me here now is Mound E. It's a platform mound, part of the true north alignment of these mounds. But not only that, not only are they aligned to each other in true north, these mounds were also perfectly aligned to Lower Jackson Mound just south of here, another mound site that dates from 4000 BC, 2,000 years older than this site. But obviously that site had great significance to these people 2,000 years after it was built.
Yeah, so as I've said about all the sites I visited in this series, not much is known about Poverty Point. This is due to two major facts. One, the people who built it and lived in it disappeared 2,000 years ago and left behind no written record. And two, modern-day slave-owning plantation farmers tilled the land to the point of Poverty Point's near total destruction. But here's the basics of what is known. It was occupied a long time ago, thousands upon thousands of years ago, and was built and maintained by who we call the Poverty Point culture. Construction was between 1700 BC and 1100 BC, and that puts it contemporary to a lot of the old stuff happening in other parts of the world like Stonehenge and the pyramids. The Poverty Point culture could very well be the first sedentary tribal culture of North America. They had settlements spanning along about 100 miles of the Gulf Coast. They had trade networks that stretched all across North America, and they were primarily fishermen. This was during an environmentally warm and wet period of the area, so fish were staggeringly abundant at the time. So it's hypothesized that as fishing was so productive, that supply never waned and never gave cause for the Poverty Point peoples to leave the area to seek other food and other resources in other places. And this is why these nomadic hunter-gatherers built settlements and occupied the site long term, while nearly the entirety of the peoples on the rest of the North American continent were doing anything but. But even though fish were abundant, It actually might not be the reason for the settlement at Poverty Point, because it was not fish, but stone that made for the Poverty Point people's success in trade and status. They might have been a permanent settlement of traders and shapers of stone, a dependable source of the best tools, religious totems, and weapons of the day. And this is crazy because there's no stone to be found anywhere in the clay and silt of the wetlands and river deltas they occupied. There's no fucking stone. Archaeological evidence suggests over 80 tons of stone was imported from other parts of North America by foot to Poverty Point, where its master stonemasons would then shape the stone into tools and ceremonial objects such as knives, shovels, bird pendants, and pipes. And that the rest of the country wanted their stone tools more than anyone else's. Kind of like how you all want a Billabong or Under Armour logoed t-shirt over a simple generic Hanes. Now think on that for a second. Imagine that there's no stone where you live. Nothing to practice on or use regularly in daily life. But you're better at carving that stone than anyone else in the whole world. So good that people who live in areas abundant with stone they've had and worked on all their lives, want to bring that stone to you and have you carve it for them instead. So much to the point that it makes you the wealthiest tribe on the continent. I mean, does anyone make the giant trek of miles and miles on foot from anywhere else in the world to see you, to get you to do something for them? Do you have the kind of reputation that inspires people to make that pilgrimage to your shabby Midwestern town for a chance to see how good you are at swiping your smartphone screen right with your thumb, or how wonderfully you've spent your life failing at any kernels of ambition you once had as a child? To see that you forfeited your dreams in favor of dropping out of school and settling into a menial service job with health insurance and 2 weeks vacation? To see that you stopped chasing love and passion and instead took a marriage of comfort and convenience? To see you avoiding family and friends out of shame for who you are and what you've become? Do they flock from thousands of miles around to watch as you masturbate alone in the darkness of your bedroom to cell phone screen projected images of people and body types of a person of your mealy variety would never have the chance to be in the same room as? You, dreaming of the touch of a supermodel, throwing your cum-soaked jack and towel onto the hardwood floor of the cookie-cutter condominium home you bought that is nestled in the horribly designed prefab community whose property values plummet daily thanks to the failings of the provisional government you elected to ram the economy head-on into a brick wall, a government tabling actual and real work on the betterment of humankind in favor of pandering to your misinformed ideological obsessions about whether or not a person who accidentally names a gender-fluid mall shooter in a comment thread argument on Twitter should be exiled entirely from all walks of life, to be fired from their job and no longer permitted to partake in free overnight shipping on Amazon Prime as a punishment for the vilest crime of this modern day and age in North America, the crime of not mindlessly following and incorporating the idealism of the day into all aspects of social life, of not sacrificing all integrity and identity in the name of conforming to the daily trends as prescribed to the masses by the lords of TikTok? Are you imagining that? No? Okay. Anyway, what I'm saying is the Poverty Point people must have been hella good at crafting stone to make their city a site of pilgrimage for the rest of North America. Its 6 C-shaped ridges seem to contain homes and workshops, designated specialty zones where specific tools or ornaments were crafted or stored. It contained a central plaza, which must have served as an observatory or for ceremony, as evident by its numerous post holes arranged in a circular fashion. Wooden circles or wood henges served as ritual centers where observing the passage of shadows allowed the viewer to track solar and lunar phenomenon. There are 6 mounds at Poverty Point, known as Mounds A through F. Mound B, west of the ridges, is a conical mound and is the oldest at the site, having been built in 1700 BC, though some archaeological evidence suggests that Mound C may be just as old or older. Mound E is unique for its depression running through the center of it, making it look similar to the layout of a Mesoamerican ball court. And the 5-foot-tall Mound F is the final construction made by the Poverty Point people at the site, dating to 1280 BC. Mound D is an anomaly, as it was not built by the Poverty Point people, but was constructed 2,000 years later by the Coles Creek culture, as evident by their artifacts buried within it, and thanks to carbon dating. The Coles Creek people occupied the Poverty Point area for only a short bit of time, and it is completely unknown why they would have chosen this site 2 millennia after its collapse for use as a mound center. And the centerpiece of Poverty Point is Mound A, one of the largest mounds in the world and, amazingly, constructed in great haste. These Stone Age folks with their woven baskets and stone shovels and bare hands, built this thing over the course of just a few months. A few months! We can barely construct a house in a few months. We can barely maintain a meaningful human relationship for more than a few months. Well, I can't because I'm a recluse who lives in a van and prefers looking at piles of dirt over into the eyes of another human being. Viewed from above, Mound A is kind of in the shape of a T. It is 72 feet high and 705 by 660 feet at its base. It is comprised of over 8 million cubic feet of earth, which, again, were moved and shaped by hand in the span of 3 months. What have you ever achieved in 3 months? A high score in Candy Crush? Over 100 donuts eaten? Successfully sat in a chair? Imagine the confusion a Poverty Point person would feel if they were suddenly face to face with you. Imagine the embarrassment they'd feel.
Just think about it. Let's say you're Stone Age Sam or Stone Age Susan. Nomadic lifestyle, struggling 24/7 just to stay alive. Life is a real struggle. And then someone comes along and says, hey, let's take woven baskets and these rocks and let's dig up 50 million pounds of earth and create this crazy earthwork. These people were hunter-gatherers. They didn't have money. They didn't have leaders. They didn't have status. They were all struggling just to survive. And time was precious. Time was so very important. One day not hunting, one day not gathering could mean life or death. Yet, they decided to move 50 million pounds of earth to create this site. What motivated them? Why did they need to do it? What is the benefit? What is the incentive? Try and relate to that. We're self-indulgent. What does it take to get you or I to take time out of our day and work at a task? Well, we won't do it unless it directly benefits us, unless it gets us money or power. I can't relate. I don't know if you can relate. I can't think of many instances where people are compelled to work together for apparently no reason other than to do the thing. Yet these people, whose lives were 10 million times harder than our own, took that time to make this massive site, this massive message to every generation that came after it.